Hello everyone, Interact back here again with another episode of Entity Education. In this episode we're going to be talking about something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about action speed and how exactly it works and is calculated both for survivors and killers. Action speed is a pretty major factor in survivor and killer gameplay, mostly when it comes to items and add-ons. I've been trying to test and work out the math to keep my spreadsheet up to date for how add-ons stack for each killer, link in the description by the way if you want to know what each killer's add-ons math is and all that. Anyways, let's talk about what exactly the formula for action speed is. Keep in mind that for a lot of newer killers, they've actually moved away from coding things in terms of action speed, which is a great idea, because action speed can lead to a lot of confusion, and it's a lot easier to just code things and change things with concrete numbers. I'll go ahead and throw up on screen an example of an older add-on, one of Hillbilly's add-ons that increases his movement speed while chainsaw sprinting. You can see it's a little bit weird, it's got action speed written in there. And then here's one for the Oni that increases his movement speed while demon dashing. You can see that it's a lot cleaner and it's just one line of code. Obviously, without even knowing what this code means, you can see that the Oni one, as I said, is just extremely clean and tells you exactly how much it increases his speed by. There's no formula or math required. However, a lot of older add-ons and survivors items and perks still tend to use the super old action speed formula, so they're kind of a bit of a hassle to calculate out, so let's just get into it. So here's the formula up on the screen right now. The formula is as follows. The result of the total time that you'll be taking to do whatever action is equal to base time times 1 divided by parentheses 1 plus the modifier, end parentheses. If you've done basic algebra in school, you should basically know how to calculate this down to find the actual time that it will take you. Keep in mind that if it's a negative modifier, you just plug in a negative number, or you can just subtract the modifier from 1 before dividing. It's the same thing. So let's start off by talking about potentially one of the most misunderstood killer perks, and then talk about why it's misunderstood. The perk I'm talking about is Iron Maiden, the one perk that nobody really cares about, but it is actually a really good example of how action speed can be confusing when it comes to knowing what something actually means in Dead by Daylight. As you may well already know if you've ever looked at the perk, Iron Maiden says that you open locked doors 50% faster. In reality, this actually only means that you open them 33% faster, which is very confusing, I know. So let's plug in the Iron Maiden action speed increase into our formula. When we plug in the 50% increase to speed into the formula, we get base time times parentheses 1 divided by parentheses 1 plus 0.5 parentheses. A lot of parentheses, I know. Which when we work it down, comes down to base time times 0.66 repeating, which ends up making it 33% faster. This is why when I say that action speed can be confusing, I'm not lying. I really wish the devs at Behavior would somehow clear up these kinds of things, but I guess that's kind of the entire reason that I started this channel, to make this kind of content to clear it up, so Anyways, let's talk about another example and talk about a little corner case and how things can go a little weird when you actually test things in the game. A little while ago on stream, someone in my chat, I think one of my mods, I believe it was Freddy, who is a filthy Blendette main, by the way, wanted to see how bad healing speed slowdown could get while using certain perks. So we tested out with Chlorophobia, which slows healing speed by 50%, Sloppy Butcher, which applies Mangled, which will slow healing down by 20%, and Thanatophobia, which slows healing speed down by 4% per injured / dying / whatever survivors. So plugging this into the formula with only a single stack of Thanat, because I only was testing this with just the one person, we get 16 seconds, which is the base healing time, times parentheses 1 divided by parentheses 1 minus 0.74, which equals out to, once we do all the math, a heal time of 61.53 seconds, which is honestly absurd. When we went and actually tested this, because I didn't believe that that was correct, I didn't think you'd get a healing time of over a minute, because I've gone against builds like this before, and it's never taken me more than a minute to heal. I checked the footage frame for frame and got a bit of an odd result. the actual time that it took to heal was only about 43.5 seconds. So did we make an error in our math, or was something weird going on? Well, it turns out that doing some thinking and some extra math, the formula is correct. However, the game seems to calculate Mangled completely separately from the other perks, so we were just looking at it wrong. So instead the formula would be 16 times parentheses 1 divided by parentheses 1 minus 0.54, which is Calorophobia and the single stack of Thanat, which will equal out to 34.78 seconds. Then we plug that 34.78 seconds into the formula instead of 16, and then apply the slowdown for Mangled, giving us the formula on screen right now, 34.78 times 1 divided by 1 minus 0.2, which will give us 43.475 seconds, which is what we were looking for. So this post explains why our result was different than what we had expected, and illuminates an interesting way in which action speed is calculated in Dead by Daylight. It seems that perks are completely calculated separately from status effects, although this only really affects healing, and there isn't another status effect in the game as of the making of this video that really slows down any other action speed, so it's really only for Mangled, I guess. Let's quickly talk about another corner case example that you may have been wondering about or noticed if you play a lot of Hillbilly. If you've ever used a Doom or Death Engraving add-on and then Sparkplug, they both have slightly increased or decreased charge times. You may have wondered why your bar still shows up red, despite both add-ons being slightly, which is a 12% change to your charge time. Well, it seems that these add-ons are actually calculated either multiplicatively or separately, and not additively. If you aren't exactly sure what multiplicatively or additively means, because you haven't played a bunch of MMOs and games like I have, basically it means that you don't add the negative 12 and positive 12 together, which will equal out to 0, giving you just a base charge time of 2.5. You multiply them together, which will give you a negative 1.44%. This can either be done by multiplying the 12 percentages together, or by calculating them separately like what we did with the Mangled. You would do a positive 12 and then a negative 12, and you'll get the same result. So plugging in the negative 1.44%, just for simplicity's sake, into the equation gives us 2.5 times parentheses 1 divided by parentheses 1 minus 0.0144, which equals out to, once we do all the math, 2.537 seconds, or a barely noticeable 0.037 seconds slower than a normal chainsaw charge. This is why the bar turns red, because technically you are charging your chainsaw slower than normal, but it's just by such a small amount that you're probably never going to notice it during the course of gameplay. Assuming that you're playing at 60 frames per second, it is literally 2.22 frames slower than normal. I guess if you're a speedrunner in another game that requires frame-perfect inputs, you may notice it, but most people won't. And honestly, that's it for this video. I really just wanted to put out a super quick explanation of how action speed works, give a few examples and a few corner cases that are a little weird, and basically I just wanted to clear up confusion about how it all functions, so that when I put out the new parts of the spreadsheet, link in the description by the way, I'm making add-on combinations for every killer. And some of the math looks really wonky, but this is why, because it uses the action speed formula. And I didn't want anyone to be very confused and messaging me all over the place. I also wanted to put this out before I talked about survivors' items or perks, because those all use action speed as I talked about. And I can just point back to this video if anyone wonders why I have some seemingly odd math. It's because it uses the action speed formula. Thanks as always for watching. Links to social media, Discord, Twitch stream, the spreadsheet that I've been talking about, Patreon, whatever, all in the description. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.